Well, good morning, everyone. Glad to have you. Third edition for this growing season of the DAACAT. Once again, we're going to go through a few things that are currently happening in the field, talk a little bit about, unfortunately, some late planting and replanting, but that's what we're dealing with this spring. At least this morning, we got the sunshine, we got no rain, one of the few days here lately. So I think hopefully this means we're turning the corner. And Paige, good morning to you. Looks like
Morning,
you got a
Jim.
beautiful backdrop. Where are you at?
I am in Storm Lake at our PDR at our research farm. So pretty excited to be out here to bring you the DeCat today.
Absolutely. And it's kind of hard to tell, but Paige's backdrop is real and mine is not. I am right next to a Precion hybrid, PR 1120, one of our short statured hybrids. All right, we're going to jump right in and start with our trivia question. We'll hit on a little bit of a GDU update and again, the current topics, spotlight product at the end. And then, of course, for those that are CCAs, there will be the QR code on the last slide. So, Paige, what's our trivia question for this beautiful morning?
All right, so brace yourself. I need everybody to have quick fingers on this one. Um, thinking about as far as the corn growth stages, gonna probably go through things pretty quickly with this type of weather anyway. But yes, so the trivia question of the day, when it comes to the growth stage, say V5, V6 in corn, give me one thing that it's known for. There's plenty. There's a lot of things that say the V6, V5, or V6 timeframe is known for. What do we got?
We've got a correct answer already. Definitely quick fingers with Peter Buchan, and that is the growing point is coming out of the ground.
Yes,
So that might be a record as far as the time of response.
I know.
Well
That was
done.
great. But yeah, you are correct, Peter. And there's so many more things as far as it's definitely a critical time in that growth stage of the corn plant. Critical time for nitrogen uptake. Um, the vulnerabilities during that time could be nutrient deficiencies, possibly corn rootworm coming through, European corn borer, which we don't see too much of that, but vulnerabilities such as once that growing point's above the ground, we don't have to worry too much about hail, frost. We're not going to see some frost, but yeah, just to name a few.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that nitrogen rate increasing here in a bit. Just as we're looking forward, dealing with the things that we've already dealt with, what would we anticipate there to be for problems and issues, and hopefully give everyone some talking points and arm yourself really with some tips on how to manage this crop going forward for the rest of the year. Well done, Peter. All right, so our GDU check-in, and this would be right at Storm Lake. So, just to talk about a few of these different planting windows. So you're looking at the GDUs from that early window, the 12th and the 15th. We're running 452, 427, slightly above the long-term average. From the 24th, that week of the 22nd through the 25th, there was a heck of a lot of corn planted. We're just slightly above normal from that GDU accumulation date. And then here about 12 days ago from the 17th, pretty big planting window then around the middle of May. And we also are running ahead there. Just a few notes. So as we look at that early window, just my own observations and talking to a lot of you, that seemed to be a pretty good window. Obviously, we had good soil conditions for most areas, not 100% across the board, but we had, for the most part, some excellent dry soils to plant into. What I've noticed is our stands are overall good from that window. Of course, it took a long time to get out of the ground, some cases 4 weeks. And even between the 12th and the 15th, I've noted the 12th or 11th looked a little bit better than the 15th. And to me, we were just closer to the time when that soil got saturated. As we got to the 15th, most areas were shut off by the rain the night of the 15th into the 16th, and we just didn't have a chance for that seed to do much. And I would say the same thing for that next window, the 22nd through the 25th. A lot of corn went in the ground. So, the overall issues and problems I would say are small on a percentage basis, but it tended to be a little worse stands, a little tougher looking unevenness as we got closer again to the rain event on the night of the 25th going into the 26th. So 22nd earlier in that week as compared to the 25th, I thought earlier the week in general looked like a better time to be planting. Obviously we wanted to get as much corn and soybeans in the ground as possible. So it's not like we would look back and change anything. But I think it's interesting on both windows. The closer we got to the saturated soil conditions, just the tougher the stands tended to look.
I would agree.
And then one more note, the 17th, 169, obviously we've got corn out of the ground from that window, as we would expect. There was corn coming up in 7 days, 8 days. And the 169, of course, is well beyond what we'd normally expect. 100 to 120 GDUs is what we get corn up. But from that first window, there were cases where we were accumulated 169 GDUs and we still didn't have corn out of the ground. So drastic difference when you're comparing GDUs early to mid-April versus mid-May to later May. It's always kind of interesting looking back.
Yes. Yeah, we just wanted to go through quick as far as vegetative stages of corn development and kind of highlight and focus on that nitrogen piece, getting a lot of questions on that. But as far as in the early time frame, I'd say during the first 35 days after planting, corn needs slightly less than 2 pounds per day of nitrogen. We need to keep that in mind with that. You can go to the next slide. And that V3 time frame, getting some questions, why is this corn kind of looking a little yellow or off in areas? And that's when we're doing that change as far as from the seed to the nodal roots, as far as, it switches from those kernel reserves for the roots to take over.
Yeah, we've talked about this in the past. Of course, the ugly corn stage this year, I think, will be in an even uglier stage, partly because we've really been slow on root development with some of the saturated soil conditions, and I think we've probably leached some nitrogen, lost some nitrogen, especially in the top few inches. So just less nitrogen available, even though, like you say, it's only using a couple pounds a day. Those 2 pounds are still kind of critical. So if we don't have that availability right around where that small root is developing, we can see more yellowing. We can just see more unevenness, and we're starting to see that now.
There's some variability out there as far as when we saw emergence come through, Jim. I mean, we have a good stand out there for the most part. There are some plants that might be a leaf off here or there, so that might contribute to more kind of some variability or fields looking a little different during that time frame.
Absolutely. Yeah, then getting into that next stage at V4, we're really starting to move along, and of course this becomes critical on weed control. And had this conversation with a number of people, especially this week, where we've got everything going on. We're planting, we're replanting, even fertilizers going on, pre-emerge herbicide, post-emerge herbicide, and so that's where it's critical. We've got some herbicides that's starting to break. Some of these corn pre's have been on for a month and a half with 10 to 15 inches of rain. So obviously they're starting to break, and we're starting to see some weeds come in. But obviously it's a very critical time as far as competition with that corn plant. Going to take away moisture and nutrients, which taking away moisture sounds like a good thing, but not so much on the nutrients. Again, even though we're using a relatively low amount, if we've got weeds taking away nitrogen from the corn, that's also going to contribute to that ugly corn stage and unevenness. And our nodal roots at this stage are starting to kick in with those nodal roots. So that's where, if we had any sidewall compaction or if we had any issues going on where that corn wasn't planted at the proper depth, that nodal root is held back or delayed, it's really going to, again, contribute to uneven corn growth.
Even go a little further as far as with V5, V6 timeframe, like I had mentioned, it's a critical period when nitrogen uptake really begins. But, as far as the side dress timing, it's a good timing for that. And the nitrogen use doubles from 2 pounds to 4 pounds per day at this time frame. There was a really good study that Iowa State did, as you can see on that slide. The research shows 76% chance of response to additional N when 15 inches or more of rain from that April 1st to July 1st time frame. Yeah, we're getting pretty close to that. But yeah, V5, V6 is definitely a stage that's super important.
Yeah, and it's a great point on the nitrogen page. Knowing that this crop has been compromised, but I think all of you that have been around for a few years, you never want to give up on a crop. We still have excellent yield potential, and this year's probably a year when we're going to see some decent response to in-season nitrogen. Now, a lot of factors go into that, of course, depending on what your original nitrogen plan was and your timing. But some of that metadata analysis that Iowa State has done, it does. Anytime you get 76% chance, that's a very high number. And there's areas that have already received 15 inches of rain. And I would say with a month to go before July 1st, we have a very high chance that we're going to see 15 inches of rain. So decent chance. And in this study, it really didn't narrow down like how much additional N, just if any additional N was applied. And usually that would be, 40 to 50 pounds, say at a minimum. But, for a relatively small additional amount of N, I think this year, probably a good chance that we're going to see some response to that. Hard to predict how much nitrogen we've lost so far. I mean, obviously with saturated soils, especially as they've warmed up, we have conversion to nitrate and we have denitrification into the air. We've also had leaching occur. Just hard to put a number on that, but I think compared to the last 5 years, our nitrogen loss rates have definitely been higher.
So yeah, the next insect that kind of put in the back of our mind is corn rootworms. So just wanted to have a little bit update on that. So as a rule of thumb, 50% peak hatch begins when the soil GDUs accumulated to 684 to 767 occurs. So you can see off to the side as far as pulling some areas around the state and what things look like. Fort Dodge is at 582 and Spencer is at 519. But also we need to think about, what is happening out here? We've had some moisture. Are the bugs drowning? Are the eggs drowning? Like what's going on? So as far as when it comes to the biology of the eggs, they can't drown. Once the rootworm larvae hatch, that's when they can die if there's excess moisture in the soil. So right now I feel like there's very little going on as far as helping, pull down the numbers. As we've seen in the past, the numbers have been increasing quite a bit. I would say the past 4 or 5 years. We've had some mild winters, and that's really when we have effect on the eggs, when we have, I'd say, negative temps for a duration of a couple of weeks. We just haven't seen that. So stay tuned on that, but just so you know, that 50% hatch will be coming up shortly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been a popular question. You think we've had saturated soils. Maybe we can look for the silver lining, some good out of that. Thinking that we've drowned out some insects, particularly rootworm. But yeah, I would agree, Paige. They're pretty tough in the egg stage. Once they hatch into larvae, though, then they need oxygen. So that's really what we're facing here in the next few weeks. Overall, we are slightly ahead on GDUs, especially from January 1st. So we anticipate an early rootworm hatch. We know in areas, southern Iowa, Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, they are dealing with rootworm, and so far it seems to be at higher levels than normal. Yet to be seen in our area, but if I was a betting man, I would say be looking for a little higher infestations. And like Paige mentioned, of course, we've been increasing the last several years, and the beetle counts last year from our sticky trap studies show that we had some high levels heading into this season, both corn on corn as well as the extended diapause corn on soybeans. So jumping into, of course, what a lot of us are dealing with, planting for the first time and replanting. Sometimes you hate to see some of these figures, but they are real. as we get into June 1st, or essentially where we're at now, we're pretty much at 78 to 80% yield potential for corn. It drops drastically, of course. Just going another 10 days, we're dropping about 15% in yield potential. So, once we get past that 7th or 10th of June, in my mind, that's when corn becomes very risky. A lot of things have to hit just right throughout the season to be able to make a decent crop. As far as the threshold right now on replants, I would be about at 20,000 or less. If we've got our normal planting dates, late April, even early May, and we've got a stand out there that's decent around 20,000. Just by years of research that shows, even though it's ugly looking, it's best to keep that stand. On soybeans, we're still in a pretty decent window, 85 to 90% yield potential. That's going to drop off rapidly, of course, not as fast as corn, but go out another 10, 12 days, and we're looking at about 75% yield potential. Now, soybeans, that replant threshold is a little bit more of a moving target, depending on your situation. If you're dealing with high pH, light soils, you need more plants out there to help out. If you've got high fertility, you've got white mold potential, we can get by with less stands. So I always want to mention that, because 75,000 is a threshold, but it can vary quite a bit depending on your own situation. So, that's where you as dealers come in and can help growers make that decision on replants. Of course, as we're getting into this late planting window, we always want to be thinking ahead. What can you do to help manage the crop for your grower, both now as well as down the road? As we're planting on corn, as much as we can do to keep that planter light, try to avoid some sidewall compaction, potential for crusting, as we're planting and replanting in these wet holes. We know a lot of times it's going to be surprise, marginal conditions, and we're going to be going in pretty wet scenarios. So anything we can do to try to make sure that we're not contributing to problems to get that corn out of the ground, the better off. Still want to keep our depth. The worst thing we can do as we get late is shallow it up. And that's the temptation, because we're planting into some wet soils. But shallow planted late corn with poor nodal root development is just not a good combination. So keep that corn at 2 inches or just a little bit deeper. Knowing that later planted corn is going to be taller, just the fact that it's going through its vegetative stages through a hotter period, a warmer period, it's going to put more distance between those nodes. So taller corn, which also means spindlier corn, stalk quality typically not as good, and more disease prone. We're pushing the reproductive stages back. Typically our diseases tend to come in as late July and August. And if we've got more ear fill, more of that reproductive stage to go, that's just going to make that plant that much more vulnerable to any diseases that tend to come in August. So we have to be very aware of that. Again, more likely we can see a response to fungicide on this later planted corn. And I know there's a balance between yield potential, but boy, if we've got a problem coming in late season, we don't want to ignore it and lose any yield potential that we have. Of course, Paige had touched on this with insect pressure, but as this late planted corn develops, it's slower to get that root system, and as a smaller root system by the time the rootworm are hatching. If we're talking about corn that's going in the ground now, and we've got larvae that are hatching here potentially in the next 2 weeks, that is a tough scenario. So have to be very aware of that. Of course, with SmartStax Pro and even SmartStax, we've got good protection, but be aware that rootworm pressure can be very devastating on late planted corn. And then also as we get in season for the beetle clipping, especially if there's the one late planted field or the late planted wet hole that we're replanting, just be very aware that the beetles are going to find that fresh silk. It's going to be a magnet. So we've got to protect that as we're thinking about pollination. Corn leaf aphids, kind of a hit and miss insect, but that's another insect that's really attracted to later planted corn. So you have to be aware of that as we get into August.
All good points.
Yeah. How about on the soybean side, Paige?
Well, when it comes to the soybean side, I think as a rule of thumb, it'd be really good to up that population 10 to 15% after that June 1st. I also know that it's not doable for everybody as far as to narrow things up, but just, if at all possible, narrow those rows just for that shading and that growth component. Um, Continue to use the seed treatments. I know we get a lot of questions. Well, it's later on, it's warmer, maybe we don't need them, but there are diseases that are prevalent, um, later on also. And then to make sure that we know, keep that maturity the same until that June 15th timeframe. Can't express that more. We want to keep maturities up until then to maximize yield potential. And then also something to think about, which we haven't seen too much in some areas though, but soybean aphids, they will like that new growth, that late planted soybean.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're this time of the year we're still maximizing yield, but we also want to make sure that we're getting canopy, we're getting pods up off the ground. So, if we switch to an early maturity, if you're in an area that's normally planting a 2.0 to a 2.5 and you jump to a 1.5, just because of the time of the year, that bean's going to shorten up even more than what it normally might. So we're kind of working against ourselves if we jump to that early maturity soybean as we get into this late May or early June timeframe for planting soybeans. And actually, I should have mentioned on the corn side too, on maturities, and something that we've talked a lot about. Boy, back late April, even I think we were already talking about maturities page, but we know every area is a little bit different as far as the maturities you're planting. But when we're earlying up, we're at that point where we certainly want to start earlying things up slightly on the corn. But again, the issue is if we jump to a extremely early corn, a 90-day corn that's just not adapted to northern Iowa, we really set ourselves up for problems. Not only yield, but usually those hybrids are not able to handle the stress that we potentially are going to have, and stock quality is usually not quite as good on those type of hybrids. So even on the earliest side, I would recommend being in that 95 to 100-day maturity range. That's given us hybrids that we're familiar with that we've used in northern Iowa. A lot of areas I'd still be very comfortable 100 to 105-day. We always have had experience planting, say, a 5438 or hybrids around that 104, 105-day maturity well into June, up to June 10th, and been able to get by just fine. And so even like 105, 105, 33 type hybrid, very comfortable with that one going into a lot of areas currently right now. Well, Paige, I think we're ready for the spotlight product of the week.
The product of the week, the alloy product of the week this week is 19E33s. It's a great 1.9 option. With this one, it's going to be a good option for the heavier soils. It's got the K gene, really, really good field phytophthora field tolerance also. When it comes to the IDC, we might place it a little narrow in that respect. It is average on IDC, white mold. Need to think about that too, average there. It's got a really nice SDS tolerance on it. Yeah, a good 1.9 option alloy. That's worked well as far as that we've seen it out commercial.
And I'm sure it's probably in that plot just across the alley from you.
It is, and I can take you over there if you want me to. I don't know if you want to come off of the presentation mode.
I'll first forward on to the last slide. So those of you that are CCAs can go ahead and scan the QR code and get your half credit in crop management for going through the work of being on with us this morning. But yeah, then give that another 30 seconds, and then we'll let Paige take us around the plot a little bit for the time we have.
Yeah, that'll be good. Where are we at on time? I don't have that in front of me.
8:26.
Okay.
8:26. It just flies, doesn't it?
It does. Yes. Craig really wanted to be here today. He's finishing up planting as we speak. But he did give me some notes and tidbits as far as what's going on out here on this particular farm here in Storm Lake. And I can definitely say these farms that we have are definitely invaluable. There's a lot of different things going on, a lot of unique things going on. So I have a list of things, so I can just kind of start with that, and then when you get off presentation mode, you can see a little better. But with that being said, I am in front of DKC 11010. This market development plot was planted on April 21st. It did just get a few days ago some corn herbicide, 2 pints of Warrant, 1 pint of harness, 12 ounces of Diflex, 32 ounces of Roundup. It looks good today. Corn's just a little floppy, but not that significant there. But some other things that we have going on at the farm here with the corn side of things, there's some no-till, some covercress no-till, corn planted in it, 2 hybrids, 2 reps. We have seed treatments, Acceleron versus a competitor check, some new formulations. I'm sure I'm not pronouncing this right, but butero is from cotton, and it's to use in soybeans, actually. So 2 modes of action, insecticide stacked. So we have untreated checks and nematicides on it also. We will have an SDS seed treatment trial close by, Levo, Saltro, Poncho Votivo, and Flupyrum in furrow. That's pretty exciting, along with those combos. Soy fungicide trial. Craig's been doing this for a while as far as for Asgrow varieties and the application of fungicide at R1, R3, R3, and then the untreated. So we're trying to look at that white mold piece of things. We do have Precion out here, 7 hybrids, 3 populations, 35,000, 40,000, 45,000. It is blocked. Got a soybean population trial, 125 to 200,000, and by 25,000 increments, there are 2 reps of that. Got a corn fusarium crown rot trial in furrow treatments, which is very interesting. Those in furrow treatments will be of Propulse with and without. So Propulse is a contact and systemic fungicide. We got Flupyrum in that and prothioconazole. Got our corn rootworm trials again at 3 locations. The VT4 Pro, SmartStax Pro. Last year, you did see a lot of activity with the corn rootworms, so that should be interesting. We have experimental corn hybrids, commercial and Precion. We've got HT4 soybeans. We've been talking about that for a few years. Our next, our proprietary 240 soybeans. So this is in a farm close by, and Adam Striegel does have them in his site also here in Storm Lake. Planting dates on the corn, April 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, 21st, 22nd, 23rd, as far as when it comes to all of what Craig has going on. And then the soybean planting dates, April 13th, 14th, May 17th, 18th, and 19th. He did say since starting planting on the 12th of April at this farm, he's had 10.5 inches of rain. So let's see if I can, I don't know if you can see that very well. This is the market development plot right here. So just over the alfalfa, I will get into our soybean market development plot, which we have Asgrow and Alloy. And the cereal rye did get killed 2 weeks ago today. It did have 32 ounces of Roundup out there. So right now, the planting date is May 17th, I believe. So they're just starting to come out of the ground. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but the cotyledons are just starting to come out there. But yeah, there's a lot going on here. Pretty invaluable place to come learn and continue to come up with management ideas and ways to grow more bushels.
Oh, looks awesome, Paige. It's like an excellent kill too
Yeah.
on the cover crop.
Yeah. Did a good job.
Mhm. Well, excellent. We are sitting at 8:31, so certainly don't want to cut off anybody's questions. If you have any questions for myself or Paige, but is anything for last words, Paige, from the farm?
It's awesome out. Good day. And yeah, thank you everybody for taking time and being on.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And Paige, thanks for being there on location. Looks like the plots and the farm is off to a great start.
Yep, it sure is.
All right, well, take care, everyone. Appreciate you being on. Have a good, safe day, and hopefully that sun will continue to shine.
Thank you.